Survivor Rites. Hello, hello. We are doing a special show, kind of very last minute here. So sorry about that, but thank you, Lori. Let me get that delay there gone. We have so much to talk about. We did this show last year, maybe the year before, I don't remember, in Worthy, and it was so well received. There's just so much information around Easter. You know, we didn't, as you well know, we didn't celebrate it. And so we have no idea what all these days are about or what the rest of the world even thinks of it. We used to say our standard answer was that we celebrate the life and death of Jesus Christ every day. Well, we had no idea what that meant. No clue.
Well, and it's interesting. You said you celebrate the life and death, but not the resurrection.
Never. That's because we didn't believe that Jesus died for our sins and that we were saved by grace. So there you go.
Yeah.
Pretty big disconnect, don't you think?
A little bit there.
A little bit. So yeah, we are going to talk about all of that today and just go through the full Easter season. And so this is going to also be recorded. So if you miss it, we can, it'll be available also on YouTube. So, what do you think? Like, we came from such a bubble of literally the disconnect between not understanding that Jesus died for our sins, very works-based, not understanding grace, no celebration ever. We didn't celebrate Christmas, no Easter, no nothing. And so we're not good at celebrating. We're very good at, the more miserable you are on earth, the greater your reward might be in heaven if you ever make it to heaven. And it's highly unlikely that you're going to get there. Okay. That's what we're used to, Lori, as you well know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that we never really understood the depth of a personal relationship with Christ, B, what it means to really celebrate all of these things. And I kind of wanted to start today by saying, I titled this group Survivor Rites, Rites, because I started it in order to do a candlelight vigil at the same time as a very prolific predator's funeral. And because one thing that we did not learn how to do in our church is lament or to have ritual of any kind. Very habitual living, but not real ritual that went with it or learning how to celebrate or anything like that. So that's partly what I want this show to be about, this whole channel to be about, is teaching people how to start having sacred moments and sacred times. And Easter is one of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is a very, very important conversation. Hi, welcome to all of you that are listening. We're going to be open for questions as we kind of go through this, but it's a lot to go through because it's a really big season. But Easter is really, in many, many cultures, for millions and millions of people in the world, the cornerstone of their Christian faith. Talk to us for a second about what that even means.
Okay. Well, one thing, in terms of rituals and stuff, the one big thing the earliest Christians celebrated was Jesus conquering death, his death and resurrection. That was the center of what became known as the church. Funny, they often were called the Way.
That is funny.
But yeah, so all four of the Gospels that are in the Bible agree. They do it a little differently, but they all agree Jesus died on the cross and rose from the grave 3 days later, on the third day after his death. They each talk about it a little differently, but that was what the church celebrated. That because Jesus rose from the dead, they didn't have to be afraid. And they lived in a time that was pretty frightening. So if Jesus was just a good teacher, but didn't conquer death and the grave, then he's just a good teacher. He's any other rabbi, any other guru, any other wonderful person to give advice. And that's not to lessen what he teaches and what he taught. But for the first followers of Jesus, the first Christians, it was more than that. It was that he not only he conquered death, but his conquering death was verification that his new way of living, this kingdom of God, this reign of heaven, which was not the reign of Caesar, that had won. That was the final word.
Love that.
Yeah.
Final word in the cornerstone of Christian life for many, many, many centuries since.
Mm-hmm.
Part of the reason that I want you on here, so for everybody that doesn't know you, Lori and I have been friends for a decade now. And literally, you are so far outside the box on, you just said teacher. So I just want to go there for a second because you're a Lutheran pastor. You have had years and years and years of theology education. You have a doctorate in it. Like you are a very educated person around theology, but you have a very specific vein to you that is so far outside anything. Like we grew up thinking that you would be a false preacher, but
Mm-hmm.
I have come to know that you are someone who will seek answers, not only in prayer, but in theology, in history, and you will compare them all together and side by side. So you are coming at this. I just want people to know that you as a person that I know and love is coming at life, love, your relationship with God, all of these things, as a teacher and as a seeker of knowledge and faith and all of it combined. So that's why I choose you to be our person to teach us these things. So that's just FYI for anybody out there that wonders why we have a Lutheran pastor on survivor rights. Okay, so let's start by Easter, the season of preparation. That's kind of where we at. Yesterday was Ash Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about a season of preparation, we're talking about the story in the 40 to 42 days or however many days it is leading up to Easter. And that's what we refer to as the season of preparation. And I'll say again, in the 2x2 church, our whole life is preparation for this coming of the Lord.
Uh-huh.
But we call this season Lent, this time of preparation that we're in here. So if you could describe for just a second, we're going to start at the beginning, day 1 of Ash Wednesday,
Mm-hmm.
how that works and what that means, and then moving into Lent and how important that is.
Okay. Just quickly about the word Lent, it comes from the Old English word that means lengthen, because in springtime the days are getting longer. So, so that's where the name comes from. We could call it anything. The season, the weeks leading up to Easter, it's 40 days, not counting the Sundays, because Sundays are not of Lent, they're in Lent. That's a picky point, but it just is. Because every Sunday is a little Easter. Every Sunday we celebrate Jesus' resurrection. But the season of Lent goes back pretty far into the church, in that in the early years of the church, people were coming from all kinds of various cultures and religions and all of that. And Easter, the day that we celebrate Jesus' victory over death, was the great baptismal festival. That was the day to get baptized, because when you are baptized, you go from death into life. Death no longer has power over you, is how I talk about why the resurrection is important to me. It's like, I don't have to be afraid of death. It's not the final word. So leading up to that, you had weeks of preparation, study, prayer, mentoring. And along the way, often people, especially in the ancient world, when you're doing times of preparation, you would do some kind of seasonal fast. I mean, right now, is it Ramadan? I
Yes,
sorry, my brain just went. Yeah,
it's
the
Ramadan.
30 days of fasting in Islam,
Mhm.
because that draws you closer to your prayer life. Friend of mine and I were just talking about the gospel lesson next Sunday is Jesus sojourn in the wilderness, where for 40 days he fasted. And we talked a little bit about fasting, and she says what she's noticed when she does fasting is when she gets those hunger pangs, instead of that causing her to say, "Oh man, I'm so hungry," it flips a switch in her brain that says, "Oh yeah, I'm doing this to remember God," and she uses it as a signal to pray. So anyway, it was a season of preparation and prayer and fasting for your big celebration. As the centuries went on and more people were raised in the church, then that season became a preparation for Easter, but how do you do it? And so it took on a lot of the penitential, a lot of the prayer and self-sacrifice. So many people I know and love who are Christian in Roman Catholic circles, they give up meat either for the entire season of Lent or for the Fridays of Lent. A dear friend posted yesterday when I said something about Ash Wednesday. She's like, "Oh, I totally forgot and ate meat today," because she's from the Roman Catholic tradition. Um, so, so it's meant to be a time to draw us closer, to get ready to celebrate the big thing. And so we give something up, or we take something on, or we do more acts of service in the community. Everybody does his or her Lent differently, and every year I do my Lent differently. Um, how what I
So,
do to draw myself closer to God.
and that is across all Christian churches. So whether they're Catholic, Pentecostal, like in general, the Easter season, that's the one thing that I think
Hmm.
all denominations kind of agree on is the season of preparation. Would you
Yeah,
agree with that?
in some of the more evangelical, non-denominational, there's not the preparation for Easter is kind of like preparing for the service, not as much of the soul searching. And that's okay. That's what works for them. But
Right.
for those of us who either came out of Catholicism or the mainline churches, that kind of stuff, we generally all agree on something that leads up to that day. You know, we do a few things worship wise. During the Sundays in Lent, we don't have flowers decorating the altar, and we don't sing or say any Alleluias. So that
Mhm.
on Easter, when we've decked out the building with flowers and we're saying Christ is risen, Alleluia, it's like a big shock. It's
Mm,
like, whoa, yeah. Um, so that's, um, you know, we
I
make
like
this
that.
season notably different, so that
Right.
Easter is like, oh yeah, that's why we're all here.
Right. So, in all of it, what we're talking about is an intentional sacrifice.
Yes.
So, um, for those of us coming out of what we came out of, all of us in this group, the 2x2 church, we had sacrifices. For us, it was a way of life. Every day we sacrificed. Every
Mhm.
day we, our whole life we sacrifice, hoping it's enough at the end. So that's the purpose kind of behind Lent. Um,
Yeah.
our speaker yesterday here on this was talking about that, and I would love your opinion on this. Should it ever be something that we're giving up? And in practice, I like this idea. that
Mhm.
choosing something that you could give up forever as a sacrifice each year. What do you think about that?
Um, some people do. I'll give you a quick story about my beloved. 20 some years ago, because he was a big coffee drinker. 20 some years ago, he gave up caffeine for Lent. And for the first week of Lent, he was miserable, in pain, all that DTs type stuff.
Mhm.
But by the time Easter came, he made the decision not to start drinking caffeine again. And for the rest of
Wow.
our marriage, we were a 2 coffee family. He was decaf, I was regular. Now that's maybe farcical. That's like, oh, well, it's just caffeine. But I mean, he felt so much better physically
Mm,
that it stopped being a sacrifice. It was
right.
something wonderful. So, yeah, I mean, if someone were to take on a Lenten discipline, is usually how I put it, whether it's giving something up or taking something on, one might find at the end of the season, that built me up. That really brought me closer to God. I'm going to keep going.
Mm,
Whether it's a certain prayer time, or giving up some food, that kind of thing. Um,
right.
yeah, the sacrifice
Interesting.
could continue on. And you had said something about your life of sacrifice, and in the hope that it would matter. For me, the way I understand my Lenten sacrifice and my Lenten discipline is I flip it. It's that because I know Jesus rose, because I know how much God loves me, therefore I get to take this
Mm,
time. So my
I
my
like
my
that.
sacrifice, my discipline is something that deepens our relationship, but it's not held over my head. Like if I mess up, if I consume something I was fasting from, or don't do one of my daily routines that I said I was taking on, it's like, okay, God, I see how much I need you. Please help me today to do it. I get to keep
I
doing
like
this.
that.
Say, oh, I blew
I
it,
like
can't do
that.
it, have to wait till next year. you know.
That's awesome. Talk to us for a second about Ash Wednesday. What does it mean? Why do people walk around with ashes on their forehead all day?
Um, it's if you think back to the early years, the preparatory, that we're getting ready for celebrating our baptism, or getting baptized. The words I say as I'm drawing a cross on someone's head. And by the way, those ashes are made by burning the palm fronds we used the previous year on Palm Sunday. So it's like
Oh, I did
everything
not know
connects up
that.
together. Yeah. So when I'm putting those ashes on someone's head, and let me tell you, when you do it to your own child or your own grandchild and they're small, it chokes you up. You say, remember you are dust, and to dust you shall return. It's a reminder of our mortality. It's
Mm,
also a reminder of our connectedness to this whole world. I mean, this whole world is dust. We are
right.
interconnected. Um, the second creation story says God made people out of mud. We are mud. The very term human means earth creature or dirt creature. So it's that reminder. Now we generally do it along with a long act of contrition, a long confession. And I mean a long one. I mean, we name out all these ways that we are unkind to the world, but the beginning words have by my fault, by my own fault, by my own most grievous fault, which back in the ancient, when churches did everything in Latin, it was mea culpa, mea maxima, maxima culpa. My fault. We recognize, we admit our brokenness and
Mm,
our mortality. Um, and then come Easter, we celebrate that mortality didn't get the last word,
mm,
that when and if, not if, but when I die, I have something even more beautiful that I'm headed to. So,
I love that.
yeah.
So there's a whole church service around getting the ash on your forehead and
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So you attend the service and then you come to the front of the church to get the cross on your forehead.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And some churches have taken to doing drive-through ashes in their parking lots. Our old parish in North Dakota, I'm not sure when she did the services, but she also had a bowl at the one restaurant in town that everybody goes into with a little sign that something to the effect of ashes to go. Spend some time in prayer and cross yourself, so you don't have to do it, but for me it's very meaningful. And I always ask
Yes.
someone after I've done them, I said, will you please mark me, because that's the one thing you can't do for me. I can't do it for myself. I can't say,
Right.
remember, Laura, you're dust, and to dust you shall return. I need someone to say that to me.
Right. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that. Love that. And again, it's the ritual of it that I
Mm-hmm.
think we,
Mm-hmm.
as two by twos, don't have experience in um, as much. So Ash Wednesday happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what is the next significant date, and how does that move
Yeah.
forward?
The next significant date would be really Holy Week, the beginning of Holy Week. So Palm Sunday.
Yes.
Um, so those weeks in Lent, you're spending time in prayer and something to draw you closer to God. And then as we get closer to the festival of Easter, and by the way, there is a reason Easter keeps moving around the calendar,
Yeah. Why?
because Easter is, see if I can get this right, the first Sunday after the first full moon, after or on the spring equinox. So,
Interesting.
and that connects up. That's why Easter and Holy Week are often really close to the same time as Passover, because Passover is calendared similarly. It has to do with the full moon and the equinox and that type of stuff. Um,
Let me ask another
yeah.
question relative to that then. So
Hmm.
why is the Christian church so anti, like, I personally follow the moon and the energies around it and all that.
Hmm.
Why is it a negative to follow the moon when the biggest celebrations?
That is the $10,000 question. Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
it's like, I mean,
I'm just asking.
no, I mean, we use, I mean, well, Christmas is always, um, the 25th and those kind of things. I'm thinking some of the reason Easter moves around is because this all did happen at Passover. And
Mm,
so the early church wanted to make sure it stayed with Passover, and Passover is based on the moons. A lot of stuff in the ancient world um,
yes,
has to do with certain months
yes,
and the moon and that type of stuff, because that was how that was your calendar. That was how you
right,
told time. It was like, what does the moon look like? Is it waxing
yes,
or is it waning? Is it crescent or is it
yep.
gibbous? All that kind of stuff.
Exactly. That's how I justify it. I just say God is the grand overall designer and he made the
Yeah,
moon and the stars and all of it. So I don't think that we're to
yeah,
discount any piece of it.
yeah. I
Doesn't
sus-
feel right to me.
I suspect, and this could be in a whole other um, rabbit warren to go down, is that when Christianity was the official state religion in Western Europe and many other places, and had that kind of control. With that control comes the fear of anybody who might challenge that. And the
Mhm.
more traditional indigenous cultures and religions that based their lives around moon cycles then became a threat to the
Yes.
powerful. You can't be controlling people if they have these other things.
Mhm.
And so out of
Agreed.
that, we, just like the whole thing that left-handedness was considered evil and all these things, it's like it was all a matter of fear and control. So I suspect it's quick story. There was an Eastern Orthodox church in Greece, so it's probably Greek Orthodox, where people would always come in and there was this blank wall. As they walked in, they would reverence the wall and then they would go in, and somebody says, "Why do you do that?" It's like, I don't know. It's what my dad did. It's what my father did. My grandmother, we all did it. And then I don't remember if it was after some kind of a disaster or just doing some remodeling, they took the stucco off that wall and found a beautiful mosaic. I don't remember whether it was of the Virgin and Jesus or of Jesus. So they had already always honored that, but they didn't know why. They just knew they were supposed to. I have a
Yeah.
feeling some of the prejudices of the Christian church and of Christians as we deal with people of other faiths and philosophies come out of that. Well, I don't know, but I was just told you were wrong.
Right.
You
And
know?
coming out of the 2x2s, I think that's so much of it, that whole fear and control aspect of it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why, like, if you literally stopped and ask any of them, like, why don't we celebrate Easter? Like, biblically, can you explain this to me? Why we, besides the standard answer of, well, because we celebrate the death and birth, the life and death of Jesus every day. Let's take that another step. Like, there's nothing. They got no,
Yeah.
that's just what we say. That's what we do. Not
Yeah.
it, again,
Yeah.
it's living
You know,
habitually that I'm combating here.
yeah. And I would guess, and this is coming from an ally looking in, if you really were to embrace the story, the resurrection, that nothing can hurt you, that we will be surrounded by God's love forever, then the controllers lose a little of their control.
Yep.
If I can
Power
keep you
goes away.
always focused on the life and death and not the resurrection,
Yep.
then I've got that control over you.
Yep.
And
We were not
I've got
allowed.
to tell you that much of Christendom and many Christian churches, the way we teach, still has a piece of that control. We are
Yes.
still fear mongering.
Yes.
So it's
Which is why I love you, because you're not a fear monger in any way, shape, or form. Also, which we're going to get to this, but we weren't
Mhm.
even allowed to wear crosses or have a cross, or, I mean, it was blasphemous to have a
Yeah.
cross of any kind. Okay, so we're on Palm Sunday. I don't want to get
Yeah.
too far
Okay.
down off the wagon here.
So
Talk to us
so
about
Palm
Palm Sunday.
Palm Sunday was Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And he comes riding on a donkey. Now, think about this. He's coming in to Jerusalem at the same time as the highest representative of Rome has either just come in or is coming in, because they always make sure to be there for the big high festivals, and Passover is the big high festival. So Pontius Pilate would have come in with this entourage and um, hundreds of soldiers riding either in a chariot or on a fancy war steed, okay, with all the regalia. And at the other end of town comes in this humble teacher and preacher and healer riding on a donkey
Mm.
with who knows how many, but pretty soon the people who are attracted to him or were attracted, they start taking off their outer coats and laying them to make like a red carpet, and they're cutting branches off the trees and they're waving them to celebrate, and they're laying them out and they're yelling out Hosanna, which means literally save us. Because in honesty, most people looking for the Christ, the Messiah, at that point understood that the anointed one, the Christ, the Messiah, was going to be the king who would lead God's armies against the Romans. So they're thinking, okay, I'm not sure why he's on a donkey, but let's celebrate. And they're thinking, this is it. And it's Passover. This is when God conquered the Egyptians. This is going to happen. And so the people are celebrating. They're so excited. They're so hopeful. Everything Jesus has been teaching and that they've heard about Jesus says this is someone special. And so they process into town. And the gospel writers kind of differ about different things, but at least one of them has him just kind of coming in, going to the temple, like, oh my goodness, he's at the temple, and kind of looking around saying, okay, and goes to somewhere else in town. At least one gospel writer says this is when Jesus flipped over the tables of the money changers and said, stop making my Father's house a place of business. Let it be a place of worship. But clearly the difference between Jesus and Rome was made clear. And so that's kind of how we start our celebration, our last few days. And just a quick aside here, traditionally you had Palm Sunday on Sunday, then on Thursday would be Maundy Thursday, we'll get to that, and then Good Friday, we'll get to that, which focused really on Jesus' death. And then a Holy Saturday would be kind of a quiet day, and then you'd have Easter where you celebrated. Well, over the years, more and more people weren't interested in coming to worship midweek. And so they would go straight from Palm Sunday to Easter without the institution of the Lord's Supper, the command to love, and Jesus' death. And so a lot of churches, including ones I serve, we read. Okay, so Palm Sunday at its purest is that celebration of Jesus coming in to Jerusalem. And so many churches either get palms or cut branches or do something to kind of reenact that, to remember that excitement. It will even be everybody processes into church singing a song, just that,
Yes.
to get excited about it.
Love it.
Yeah.
We did not get excited about nothing.
Nothing.
Nothing. We sit in silence with our head down at all times.
Yeah.
And I am not exaggerating. Okay, so Palm Sunday, and you're waving and you're doing the Passion of Christ, and Jesus is coming and Jesus is going to save us. That is the whole point of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So there is a lot of so then Maundy Thursday
Yes.
comes in. Okay.
Yes.
Talk to us. This is where humility and service really stands out.
Yeah.
For anybody,
Yeah.
any Christian. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So Maundy Thursday, it's not Monday Thursday, it's Maundy Thursday.
Maundy for anybody out there.
Yes. And it connects up to the word command. Jesus gives a command. Now, he gives a number of commands that evening. He washes his disciples' feet in at least 2, if not 3 of the Gospels, and tells them, I know you don't get it, but you need to do this for one another. Because in the ancient world, you had a servant who washed people's dusty, gross feet when they came into your house, and it was your lowest servant. So when your highest teacher kneels down and washes your feet, that humility, as you said, that humbling yourself, serving one another. So that's one of the commands that goes with Maundy Thursday. Another one is that in John's gospel, this is where Jesus says, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. So that also goes with what it means to be a follower of Jesus, a Christian, is that we humble ourselves, we serve one another, and we love like Jesus loved us. So we've got two commands. The third command is the meal itself.
Right.
Three of the gospel writers say it was a Passover meal. John has it just a meal because he has Passover starting a day later. But that was a meal of remembrance that connected God's people to God's early people. And Jesus took the symbols of that meal, the bread of affliction and the bread of promise, the cup of salvation, the cups of promise, all that. He took those and he gave them new identities. When he broke the bread, that was the bread of the promise that the Messiah would come. He says, "This is my body. Take and eat. Do this in remembrance of me." And then he took one of the last two cups of the meal and said, "This cup is a new covenant, a new agreement with God in my blood, shed for you and for all people for the forgiveness of sin. Do this in remembrance of me." So he commanded that his followers would, in some form, do this meal. And in doing so, remember. And it's not just, oh yeah, I remember. It's like remembering, like bringing the members back together, reconnecting. And across Christendom, there are different theories and opinions about whether it's bread and wine or bread and grape juice or unleavened bread and all this type of stuff, and what actually happens when the words are spoken. Whatever works for someone is what works for them. What's important to me is that as we receive and share that bread and that cup, we are connected to every other follower of Jesus back to the beginning of the church. That connects us up.
I love that.
Yeah.
I want to also let everyone know. So I attended Lori's church for quite some time when we lived in Northern California, which is where she is. And this is where what we would call the worker china, literally. So we would set this table and it was the finest china. It was
Okay.
the best. So part of the reason I want to have this conversation with everybody this early, if you can plan, if this is something that you want to use the Easter season as a way to renew your relationship with Christ and however you want to do it. Maundy Thursday would be the place to start, really, unless you wanted to start yesterday, which was Ash Wednesday. But Thursday, this Thursday meal is so powerful. It's where the connection of community coming together. It is using your best dishes, serving the best meal, and partaking of the body and blood of Christ.
Yeah.
What would you say to that, Lori?
Yeah. I really like that. And it sort of breaks my heart that it gets lost and forgotten so often or rushed through instead of really, really connecting. One of the things we do, and we don't do it every year, but we often will do, is we will use what we understand of a Passover Seder meal. All the cups, all the steps, all the rituals, not to say we're play acting that we're Jewish, not to denigrate or do anything, but just to say when we see how important this meal is to Jews and how important that meal would have been to his disciples, it connects us up because the Passover celebrates God freeing God's people from slavery. You know, that is why they do the Passover every year, remembering the freedom from slavery, the God leading them out through the sea to freedom and all that kind of stuff. So for me as a Christian, when I think of Maundy Thursday, and every time I receive communion and I connect it up with that, the Passover, God freed me from slavery. I'm not enslaved by Pharaoh, but I'm enslaved by myself and my shame and, you know, all that type of stuff. So for me, it is a meal of freedom.
I
And to
love
be
that.
able to connect that does not have to include looking at and doing all the rituals that go with the Passover Seder. But when you see how deep and important that meal was, it wasn't just any old night. It was a special night. Um,
Right.
and the more we can make that night special, um,
Yeah.
I
I
think the
love
more it
that.
connects us. Yeah.
I have such great memories of this meal at your church for years. It was just great.
Yeah.
I do want to also like part of that. I loved the idea that you said of that we get to do that. Like we get to like, and I feel that like just the humility of being of service in, you know, being right now what we're doing of just being able to wash the feet and to love people in
Yeah.
a way. It is such an honor to do that. So
Yeah.
so that's Palm Sunday. That took us then to Maundy
Maundy
Thursday.
Thursday. And something,
So
so in between Palm Sunday and Maundy Thursday is when one of Jesus' followers, one of his star students, went to the religious authorities and says, I know you want to arrest this guy. How about I help you? And they offered to give him 30 pieces of silver, and this is Judas. Judas was at that meal. Jesus washed his feet. Jesus shared the meal with him. I mean, I just always remind myself of that. Um, and at that meal, he says to Peter, because he talks about, I'm going to be betrayed. And Peter's like, oh, I'd never betray you. And he looks at and says, before the rooster crows tomorrow, you're going to deny me 3 times. Oh, no, I'd never do that. And they all, yeah. So after the meal, they go out to a garden to pray. And it's the Garden of Gethsemane. This is a garden attached to an olive orchard. The name comes from the stones that you use to press olive. So he goes out and he's praying. Judas has already left to go get the authorities. Jesus is praying, and he knows what is coming. He knows the pain and sacrifice he's about to go through. And so as he is praying, I love the fact that he says, Father, if you could remove this cup from me, if there's any other way to do this. Now, this is Jesus saying, I wish there were a different way. But he commits himself to this path of self-sacrifice. He gets arrested and hauled off to the religious authorities, who in the middle of the night are questioning him. Their guards are beating him. And this is where Peter is one of the disciples who kind of follows along and is trying to figure out what happens. And 3 different times people say, you're one of his followers. It's like, no, I don't know who you're talking about. So that's in the midst of all that. So Judas has betrayed him. Peter has betrayed him. And then Jesus gets sent over to where the Roman authorities are, because the religious authorities have no authority to get rid of Jesus. All they can do is kick him out, but they can't get rid of him. So then they send him off to Pontius Pilate, the leader of the highest Roman official, and says, oh, he's been calling for insurrection. He's been calling for a military uprising against Rome. He's an enemy of the state. And Pilate was even like, "Are you sure?" you know? But eventually, for whatever reason, the government and religion got together and said, "Okay, let's kill this guy." And so the next morning, he has to march through town, the perp walk through town, carrying probably just the crossbar of a cross, but this heavy wood, as the crowds are watching. So here it is, just a few days later, after the crowds cheered him, and now the crowds are seeing him beaten and battered and barely able to walk. And they finally have to get somebody to help him carry his cross because he's falling down. And they crucify him on the hill called the Skull. Some say because it looked kind of like a skull. Anyway, he and two other people. Now, we often call them thieves or criminals. Thieves and criminals would not have been crucified. The only people who got crucified were enemies of Caesar, enemies of the Roman state. That was how the government terrorized the people and kept them under control. So most likely, the guys on either side of Jesus were zealots who had been trying to lead an uprising, maybe even had killed a few Roman soldiers in terrorist attacks. We don't know. But the three of them are crucified. And crucifixion is probably one of the most heinous ways of killing somebody. It takes days for someone to die. You do not die from blood loss. You die from suffocation because your lungs fill up with water. The whole process is gross and disgusting. And in fact, that's why at least one of the gospel writers has that Pilate gives the authority to go break the legs of the three men on the crosses so that they would be dead before the big celebration, so that it would cause less problems with the crowds. And that was where they found Jesus had already died. But yeah, and when someone was crucified, it took them hours at least, if not days, to die. And then their bodies were just left up there for everyone to watch it rot away. I mean, it was meant to be fearful, fear-filled to the max. And so the fact that Jesus, who taught love, who taught there is another way of doing life in the world that is about serving and caring and connecting, was killed by Rome in the most heinous way. It's so clear that it's like, yeah, his way and the world's way are at odds, and the world had to get rid of him. And that he willingly did it. And here's where I get in trouble with other Christians, because a lot of people make the cross as what God demanded. God demanded a sacrifice for your and my sin. And it had to be a perfect one. So God laid all our sin on Jesus. God did not demand the blood. We demand blood. We are the bloodthirsty, fear-filled, hate-filled, prejudiced people. We demanded blood. And so God says, okay, you want blood? You can have mine. I make God kind of flip it right there, but it's like, yeah. You want blood? Here's mine. Take my blood. And in doing so,
Good Friday is a sad day. It's a difficult day. It's a difficult service. So for people who go to Good Friday service, the reason that service happens in many, many churches, and why it's so important is the willingness and the sacrifice that was made.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That's what's good about it is in the
Yes.
cross, Jesus conquered death. On the cross, God wiped away everything that separates us from God. And what separated us from God was not God's anger, it was our shame. You know, on the cross, God wiped that all away. That's what makes
So
it
I
good.
just, yes, I want to be very clear that it's a very heavy day, even though
Mm-hmm.
we call it Good Friday. It is a very, very heavy day, and it is a
Yes.
day of grieving but
Yeah.
also gratefulness, deep, deep gratefulness.
Yeah.
So the next, is there anything more you want to say about Good Friday? Otherwise, we're going to move on to Holy
No,
Saturday.
yeah. It's Good
So
Friday.
Holy Saturday is not everybody calls it Holy Saturday, but it in general it's considered a Holy Saturday. It
Mm-hmm.
is a day of grieving, a day of loss, a very, very day of uncertainty, a day of sadness, a day of silence. And many traditions have what they call a silent Saturday. Talk to
Yeah.
us about that.
Yeah. You know, and as a pastor, because that Saturday is also a day of preparation for me,
Hmm.
I often am already starting to think Easter. And I always need to pull myself back. And it's like, okay, Easter will happen whether you're ready for it or not, girl. Live in this time. You know,
Right.
the scriptures talk about the women watched him die. They watched him be buried, and then they went off because it was evening. They had to go home. It was the Sabbath, because the Sabbath is Saturday, so they had to go home. But they were preparing. They couldn't anoint his body, or they couldn't embalm and anoint his body for burial. They were going to have to wait until Sunday to do that. But on this Saturday, they were preparing themselves for that. So the focus is still our teacher has died. The one we had put all our hopes in had died. You know, that's where their minds are. And so for us, even though we know, you know, I can almost hear those hallelujahs ringing. I know it's about to happen. To be able to spend that time and in silence, in quiet meditation of whatever form,
Right.
I think is powerful and important, and a real
Yes.
gift. Some
Right.
churches will do a prayer vigil from, um, well, they do different ones. The Episcopal Church will do a prayer vigil from the end of Maundy Thursday service through Easter morning, because
Mm,
they have a portion of the elements from communion that sit in a separate little spot, and they pray there. They're not worshiping the elements, but that's their focus.
mm,
And so they'll have someone in the church around the clock from Thursday night through Sunday morning praying. Um, other churches just get someone to agree to pray around the clock, maybe not in the building, but somewhere. That sense
right.
of the church is praying. We are meditating on God's love for us and what that cost Jesus and what that costs God. Um, so, and it's a bittersweet, because it's
Right.
at the same time as it is painful and sad, it is beautiful because of what God has done. So,
Well, and I
yeah.
love the again back to the ritual of as we're taking emblems and to when you're taking the bread of Christ is the
Mm-hmm.
do this in remembrance of me. And so I feel like there is a very somber when I take emblems, the sacrament, I feel very strongly that like just the visualization of him dying for my sin
Mm-hmm.
is very, very powerful. And I don't think we ever, I don't know, I never made that correlation in meeting.
Yeah.
Um, of really even understanding the depth of Christ dying for my sins. That just is not something that we focused on. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that moves us into resurrection. He is
Woohoo.
risen. That is the entire celebration
Yes.
of Easter Sunday. So talk
Yeah.
to us about that.
Yeah. So Easter morning, or if you're in a high church somewhere shortly after midnight on Easter morning, um, we start celebrating. We get the word that that death from Friday didn't didn't last. That Jesus rose, um, and I last Easter I gave an image. This is because it's not just that, because Jesus went into the dead, whatever that means. What, and everyone has different views of that, but Sheol, dead, that kind of stuff. I love movies. I love superhero movies. And it was one of the Marvel movies. It was the first Captain America movie where the hero was had dropped behind enemy lines to try to free some Allied soldiers who were imprisoned. And everyone is convinced back at the camp that not only did he fail, but he died. They lost contact with him, more despair than they had before. And then suddenly they hear boots marching and people singing, and they see all of these soldiers who had been prisoners coming towards them, some in vehicles, some marching, and leading the way is Captain America. And to me, that's Easter morning. Not Captain America, but Jesus storming the gates of death, kicking out those walls that kept people imprisoned and freeing everyone. And so it's not just him coming out of the tomb, it is everyone who has or will ever die coming out with him. It gives me goosebumps to picture that, you know.
Yes.
So when on Sunday morning I get to say it, when I get to say on Sunday morning after weeks and days of focusing on death, I get to say, Christ is risen. And the congregation says back, Christ is risen indeed. And we always say it 3 times on Easter morning. Christ is risen indeed. Christ is risen, Christ is risen indeed. Christ is risen, Christ is risen indeed. Alleluia. We get to say it for the first time in worship in weeks. It's like life is different. We are celebrating. And it's not that we didn't celebrate God's love through the season of Lent and preparation, but now we've pulled out all the stops. You know, we are saying death no longer has rule in my life, which means you can't make me afraid of you. There's nothing you can
Right.
take away from me that
Right.
is ultimately worth anything.
That's one of my questions is, what does the resurrection in daily life, in everyday life,
Mm-hmm.
what does that look like? Because for us, we believed that we were living it and that was, the point of it all. So that resurrection and the joy of, like, this is what I also don't understand. In the 2x2 church, there is no joy about the resurrection. It's just this whole, like, death is death. It's just fear and death, even
Mm-hmm.
through death, and even at funerals, which they take funerals to a whole nother level. But at funerals, it's even the preaching there is so, we can only hope that at that we know that he will make it to the gates of heaven. There is no joy ever. So how they can say we celebrate anything, the death and life of Christ,
Yeah.
when you actually understand what millions and millions of other Christians in the world understand and do, and what history has, I don't care what version you read, it all says the same thing. There is this huge celebration of the resurrection of Christ, and he has risen and he has died for our sins.
Yeah.
Somehow we missed that whole part. You guys that are listening, am I missing something? Because we missed all that.
Yeah.
I don't understand. So the hope, I guess for me, what I'm really saying is the hope that comes with that um, is so interesting, and how Easter has really evolved over time and what that means
Mm-hmm.
to us now. But I really think that the Easter story, this is what I said, personally resonates: the wilderness, the cross, the waiting, and the resurrection. All of those aspects of the Easter season are so important and have everything to do with the hope that comes with the resurrection. So, you mentioned earlier that this is a day of baptism. We've been having quite a bit of conversation here on Survivor Rights around baptism and what
Mm-hmm.
that means and what that looks like. If you would speak for just a second about the hope of resurrection, the joy of resurrection, the celebration of he is risen, and how that relates to baptism and what that really means for people.
Yeah. Yeah. So for many of us, definitely mainline Lutheran, Methodist, Episcopal, Roman Catholic Christians, when we talk about baptism, and we just what anyway, so the the going under the water is just like Jesus going into the tomb, and the coming out of the water is Jesus emerging from the tomb, and we go in and come out with him, whether it's as a baby or a grown adult or somewhere in between. That it connects us to the death and burial, and we can no longer die. Now that does not mean at some point my heart is not going to stop beating. I'm not, I'm going to stop breathing. I know I will die, but I believe that because of what Jesus did and God's love for me, that death will not be the end. That the resurrection is there for me as well. And so I'm living in the resurrection now, even though I'm not.
Right.
I trust and believe that whatever it's going to look like, I'm going to be forever with the source of all love. I love.
And that's why, so for many, many churches around the world of all different denominations, Easter is a day of baptism. It is a day that most churches do the most baptisms,
Mm-hmm.
is because it is specifically tied to Jesus dying for our sin and
Yeah.
going to the death. And yeah, and I just think so how important is it, or would it be, for someone to be rebaptized if they were baptized in the 2x2 church? There's a lot of discussion right now around who's
Mm-hmm.
authorized to baptize someone, how that all works, specific as Easter's coming, because I think this is
Yeah.
something that some of us, a lot of people probably in the world, especially coming from the 2x2 church, which is what we're talking about today,
Mm-hmm.
want to know how does that, how in your opinion and your
Yeah.
theological educated opinion.
Yeah. Um, it is quite a pastoral discussion. I mean, I've been in on it many times with colleagues and even back in my seminary days, because in our tradition, We understand that once baptized, always baptized. And we're not going to ask, well, who did it? Did they have the authority? So then it becomes a pastoral issue. You know, I do not need you to be rebaptized. God does not need you to be rebaptized. But do you need something? Do you need to re-experience or experience the joy for the first time or whatever? I mean,
Right.
many times on Easter, we will do a reaffirmation of our baptism, where all of us, again, say the baptismal vows, and we all hear again. But that feels a little out there. Some people, I think, really need to experience that again. And, you know, as a pastor, I'm not going to deny somebody that. If that's what they need to feel closer to God, then I'm going to help facilitate that, whether it's my doing it with and for them or my connecting them with someone, especially since I don't have a full, you know, get under the water, dunk baptismal font. I have a font, I don't have a big baptistry. So if somebody really needs that full body experience of death and resurrection, burial and coming up, you know, do we go down to the Klamath River when it's not storming, or do I help connect you to somebody whose church does have a swimming pool or that type of stuff?
Right.
You know, one of the things, I don't know when I started doing it, but somewhere we started always having the baptismal font at the church open and full of water. Because in the Lutheran tradition, we are taught that every time we wash our face is a time to remember that we are baptized. Every time we take a shower or take a bath is a time to remember that we are baptized. So we have some folks in the church, most of them come from Episcopal background, who as they walk into the sanctuary, they dip their hands in the water in the font and either touch their forehead or cross their forehead or cross themselves. It's that remember that you are baptized. Remember that you belong to God. It's this just remember that you are dust and to dust you shall return. This is remember you are baptized and will always live with God.
Yes, I
So for
love
some
that.
people that would be enough, but some
Right.
might feel the need to say, I wasn't baptized into the Christian church, into a Christian
Yes.
faith. I feel the need to do it. And then I'm going to say, as a pastor, I'm not going to stand in your way. It's kind of like when
Yeah.
Stephen, yeah, is riding along with the Ethiopian eunuch, and he tells them all about Jesus, and they go past a mud puddle on the side of the road, and he says, "What's going to keep me from being baptized?" And it's like, I guess nothing. You know. Or later when Peter and his friends are talking at the household of Cornelius, and the Holy Spirit comes on the whole household, and then they actually do the baptism. They're baptized by the Holy Spirit, and then they do the baptism. They go back to the church authorities in Jerusalem and said, who were we? The Holy Spirit already moved. Who are we to get in the way? You know?
Yeah.
So if someone is
So
needing that physical means of grace, I'm going to make it happen.
yeah. I think it's Janelle's actually saying here, we were originally baptized into the religion, world, and workers, or to Jesus Christ. I think it's just a person. I agree. And she's saying it's an individual thing. It is an individual thing for
Mm-hmm.
anybody coming out of the 2x2 church, whether you choose to do that or not, or
Yeah.
need to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's more of the. So while we're on that very quickly, the other discussion I want to have along with the baptism is the taking of the sacrament.
Mm-hmm.
And the bread and the wine. We always used grape juice and bread, but of course it was. But um, talk for just one quick second, if you would, about the importance of that specifically on Easter Sunday.
I guess for me, First off, for me, every Sunday is a little Easter. That's why, for me, it's important to offer the sacrament every week that it's possible. But again, it goes back, Jesus said, do this as often as you do it in remembrance of me. And when we are celebrating everything God has done for us in Easter, part of me says, why would I not want to receive that sacrament? You know, I only get to do baptism once, and I was 6 weeks old. I don't remember it. But I get to have the Lord's Supper. I could do it every day, but I get to do it every week, you
Right.
know. And especially on the high festival days and Easter, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. Darla and I a few times have done ordered the little bread and wine cups,
Oh,
the little
yeah.
wafers and stuff, and done them together to just to do it,
Yeah.
to take the emblems. But yeah, just interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a lot. That's a lot, and it's just like this is one thing I will say. So as two by twos, we talk about we live it, and one of the things that we struggle in going to church, any church ever again in our lives, is because people don't take it as seriously as we do. We think that it is about every choice you make, everything you do, all day, every day.
Mhm.
Our walk with Christ, that's what were raised to believe. And so for people who just go to meeting on Sunday morning or Wednesday night or whatever, like they're not taking it nearly serious enough, in our opinion. And we are judgmental, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that Jared talked about last night, if we could give up judgment for Lent, just
There you go.
if as two by twos, we could start right there. Just be aware, give up the judgment for Lent. You will be amazed how judgmental we really are. It is
Yeah.
shocking. But anyway, so just for this season, what a sacrifice that would be to give
Yeah.
that up and to let love there instead. How powerful would
Mm-hmm.
that be?
Yeah.
Anyway, I love this. I love that the season of Easter invites us to lay down our sacrifice and invite Christ into our daily life. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about. How would you summarize everything that we've talked about, everything you know about the 2x2 church? What would you how would you summarize all of this?
Um, I'm gonna riff off of what you just said about inviting Christ to be a part of our everyday life,
Mhm.
to add, and being surprised and overjoyed to find out he was already there. You know,
Yes.
even when I am not taking my faith as seriously as I could, and I own that. You know, as a pastor, as a committed Christian, I recognize that there are times I silo that off. You know, even when I'm not, the moment I turn and look, I find out that Jesus was there all along. That God's love had me enfolded the whole time. And so during this season, to really take that time to get serious about and look at and sit with the reality of God's love will do a couple things. One, I believe it will make me more joyful and less judgmental. But it also
Yes.
will encourage me and enable me to take this path of following Jesus more seriously on a day to day basis, on a moment by moment basis. Because of my brand of Christianity, and we talk about we're born again every day, born anew every day. Thus, every time I wash my face or take a shower, I'm reminded. Every day is a new opportunity to celebrate the resurrection. Every day is a new opportunity to celebrate God's love. Every day is a new opportunity to serve my world with God's love. And I get to do that because I don't have to be afraid of what if I do it wrong. I mean, if I totally mess up, I get to say, I'm sorry. And I get to learn from that and make amends and make a better world. Because God's love doesn't end.
I love that. And that is the gift of it. I think I'm going to speak for myself, all the judgment that went with anybody that goes to a worldly church or goes to confession, that they just think, oh, well, I can just go confess my sins. I can do whatever I want and then confess my sins and I'm fine. And all the judgment that goes with that. And trust me, there's lots.
Yeah.
But it's, I think the individual relationship with Christ is something that is new to all of us. It is something, it's just a different way. Ours, it was so social and so connected to
Mm-hmm.
the system and the rules and all of that, and trying to stay within all that was so confining, that then to have the freedom but like I just say all the time, I've been having a conversation with several people, but just struggling with different things. And it's like, when you let the love come into that, whatever it is,
Yeah.
into the conversation, and to lose the self-righteousness and to lose the judgment, and to realize that at the end of the day, we're not in charge.
Yeah.
It really takes away so much of the fear and insecurity and need to control everything and all of it. It's just
Mm-hmm.
fascinating.
Yeah.
So, does anybody out there have any questions specifically for Lori? Anything around Easter? We are done on time here. We went way over, but
Yeah,
that's
we
okay.
did.
This is super important. So any questions or anything out there that anybody has? Otherwise, I'm going to give you last word. I always give everyone last word. And I want to thank you again for explaining so deeply how important this season is, and especially this early in the season, to give people a little bit of time to reflect on how they might want to celebrate it this year, probably for the first time ever in their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last
Well,
word.
yeah, I would definitely say if you haven't really had that wonderful joy of really celebrating Easter as God's victory, Jesus' victory, then yeah, if you could find some way over the next few weeks to really spend time in prayer, spend time in service, give up judgmentalism for Lent. I love that. Um, Whatever, but even pull out your Bible and read the stories. Each one of the gospel writers does it a little different and brings a little different flavor to it. Really read and pray on that and say, wow. And remember, this is a story of God's love. It's not meant to make us feel guilty. It's not meant to be a threat. It's meant to be the good news. The very term good news was the fastest soldier would come back from the war to tell the community that their army had won. That's what the evangelion was. So if we read the Easter story as good news, God has won. Let that sink in. And yeah, find somebody to talk to about it, talk with about it. Take the time and recognize that you are loved, and it was for you and you alone that God did all of this. And it was for the person next to you and that person alone that God did all of this. It's like that's how deep God's love is.
I love that. And we
Yeah.
don't need a way to the way. We don't need an intercessor. We
Right.
don't need anybody to, we have direct access.
Yes, we do. We do. I
And
mean,
that's
if others help us, that's wonderful. but we don't need that.
Right. That's where community comes in. That's what
Yes.
fellowship is. That's, when two or more are gathered. It's all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's important. But it's not the thing.
Yeah.
Which is so. Okay. Well, happy Easter early.
Yes. And a blessed Lent.
Yes, there you go. If you'll keep an eye on comments, I'm sure that as we've had a lot of shows this weekend between Worthy and Survivor, so it's a lot for people to keep up with. But I'm sure that over this next few days, people will, and I will also be posting it to YouTube this afternoon. So I want to thank you for all of this. It's a lot of information, I know, to get through, but it's also super, super important. And it is something we never learned. So I thank you for your time. I know how busy you are. And for mostly, I want to thank you for your love for me, for so many.
Thank you.
You do
Thank
so
you.
much.